In front of us today is a build that I've been very excited about. By the way, this is an actual hunter build for PvE, one of which I've been looking forward to since the first time we saw Solar 3.0. Now this build focuses around the exotic Bombardiers and essentially dodging as much as possible, proccing the perk Parting Gift while also keeping you alive in the midst of groups of enemies. Now this build isn't about scorching and igniting, although inevitably you'll be doing that. It's more aimed at infinite knives, tons of grenade drops on dodge with Bombardiers, and tanking a heck of a lot of damage. Now there's no required weapons for this build besides a solar weapon to make use of Ember of Tempering, which grants you and nearby allies increased recovery on solar weapon kills. Now of course you can use any solar weapon, but something with incandescent really works wonder because of Solar 3.0. Personally, we just got through reviewing Jotun. By the way, if you haven't checked out our young Jotun build, by all means check it out. Now unlike our Titan build, this build is actually much less complicated in how it works. There's still quite a few healing and restoration mechanics going on, but the gameplay loop is a lot simpler and familiar. So let's start off with the big stuff. This is a solar build, so of course use a solar subclass, but you can use whatever super you want, although Blade Barrage is fantastic for damage as well as having such a fast cooldown. For the dodge though, we are going to be using Gambler's Dodge. This of course refreshes your melee and you're able to get it back pretty much every time you dodge near a target, which is what you're going to be doing anyways with Bombardiers. Now if you find yourself never needing Gambler's Dodge, you can of course use Marksman Dodge if you want, but I would stay away from Acrobat's Dodge here because the cooldown is 3 times as long. And the goal here is to have a dodge back as often as possible. Now the knife we're going to be using is of course Knife Trick. It's very easy to deal damage and get kills with this knife. Plus it looks dope. Grenade is really up to you. You can always use the healing grenade if you want, just to refresh restoration in between groups of enemies. But really you can go with whatever you want here, guys. Now your aspects include On Your Mark and Knock Them Down. On Your Mark simply because it gives you 3 fragment slots, and Knock Them Down because while radiant, final blows with your equipped throwing knife fully refunds your melee energy. Now for our fragments, we have Ember of Singeing, which makes our class ability recharge faster when we scorch targets. This means on every Knife Trick melee hit and on every Bombardier grenade hit, as that also causes Scorch too. We're also making use of Ember of Ashes to apply even more Scorch to targets, and with Ember of Empyrean, extending the duration of radiant restoration effects on solar weapon or ability final blows. You can see where this is synergizing so well. We also have Ember of Tempering, which we've already talked about, that increases recovery, as well as Ember of Torches, which makes us radiant on melee attacks. Now as far as mods go, the cream of the crop for this build is of course Classy Restoration. No surprises there. It's a really good mod. Classy Restoration states that activating your solar class ability will grant you restoration. What this mod description doesn't tell you is that the restoration you do obtain from this mod is actually restoration times 2, which is the same restoration effect that Titans get from Loreley. Essentially, double the effect of regular restoration, allowing you to take tons of damage without even falling to critical health. Now this restoration times 2 will last around 8 seconds base, but can be extended with Ember of Solace if you wish to use that. But for this build, you'll be refreshing the duration of restoration so quickly that Ember of Solace isn't really needed. Instead, you'll be using Ember of Empyrean. This actually allows you to refresh the duration of any radiant and restoration effects applied to you, which you'll be doing all the time with Knife Trick. Do note that unfortunately, kills with Bombardier grenades do not refresh the duration of restoration or radiant, since it's not technically an ability kill. Granted though, Bungie, please make that change, okay? Like I think it should qualify as an ability kill. Now Knife Trick will do the trick though, as it's very easy to get kills with it, even multiple kills at once. Now we're also going to be taking advantage of Dynamo. Considering we're going to be dodging so much, we might as well reduce our super cooldown when using our class ability near targets. We're also taking advantage of 2 focusing strike mods on our gloves to give us extra class ability energy just from dealing damage with our melee attacks. You can also pop in 2 Armor of the Dying Star mods for that extra solar and void resist to add on even more tankiness with that restoration. And fellas, if you're not rocking max resilience this season in PvE, for the love of God, what are you doing? 40% damage resist, you gotta be using it. Try to get that with your mobility as high as possible. Even though a lot of us like recovery, restoration will carry you here. Now when it comes out, the build actually functions. We're making use of Elemental Wells, more specifically Reaping Well Maker, Melee Well Maker, Well of Life, Bountiful Wells, and Well of Tenacity. Since this build really focuses on dodging as much as possible, Reaping Well Maker just made too much sense here. Do a dodge, get a weapon kill, boom, you got a Void Well just like that. 2 Void Wells actually because of Bountiful Wells, and picking up a Void Well will not only grant you ability energy, but also Well of Tenacity, which is a 5-second 50% damage reduction. Now Melee Well Maker is going to be your source of solar wells. Each Knife Trick kill will spawn 2 solar wells, which will grant you ability energy. You see where like a ridiculous amount of ability energy is constantly coming back to you. This will of course proc Well of Life for that increase in health regeneration, which of course will stack with restoration. And this is essentially the gameplay loop here. Run into a group of enemies, dodge. This one dodge right here here will drop a grenade from Bombardiers, give you restoration ×2 from classy restoration, reduce super cooldown from Dynamo, reduce class ability cooldown from Ember of Singeing, grant on your mark ×3, which is a massive weapon handling and reload speed buff, and if you get a solar weapon kill, this will proc Ember of Tempering for increased health recovery and will spawn 2 Void Wells from Reaping Wellmaker and Bountiful Well, granting you that ability energy and that 50% damage reduction from Wallah Tenacity. And if you get a knife trick kill, this melee kill will spawn 2 Solar Wells from Melee Wellmaker and Bountiful Wells, granting you class ability energy depending on how much damage you deal thanks to the 2 focusing strike mods that you have. This of course makes you Radiant because Ember of Torches, which grants your melee right back because of Knock 'em Down, as well as increase the duration of restoration ×2. These Solar Wells will also proc Well of Life for that increase in health regeneration, continue throwing knives until you get your dodge back, rinse and repeat. Now running this loop means you're pretty much always going to have constant uptime of not only restoration ×2, but also Well of Tenacity, Well of Life, Radiance, and increased recovery, all while dipping and dodging around, dropping bombs everywhere, being completely unkillable. Also, if an enemy gets hit with a Bombardier Bomb Blast and Knife Trick, yes, it will cause them to ignite. If you so happen to have enough room here on your class item, considering we are taking advantage of those ignitions, you might as well be taking advantage of Solar Fulmination. That only costs us 3, so that means you could still have classy restoration with Solar Fulmination. Even if you have to give up one of these other well mods, do it for the increase in that ignition and blast radius. Now someone's gonna ask, Cross, why not just lean into ignition even more? Why not apply Ember of Eruption? You can do that, absolutely. Like if you feel like you have enough survivability with just classy restoration, guys, slot out Ember of Tempering for Ember of Eruption. And now we've got some massive explosions occurring. Stacking some Jotun shots in between all of this, and there's a lot of nasty to be had here. Fellas, Bombardier is one of my favorite exotics on the Hunter class. We've used it in the past, but here with Solar 3.0, it's gotten a hell of a lot nastier. If Bungie actually does make that change, where a Bombardier bomb kill is considered an ability kill, oh, this build is gonna get so much nastier. Either way, where it sits now, I'm extremely impressed with this build. Guys, feel free to suggest any of your favorite builds down below. We do check the comments, and if you want to give a little more of a detailed response to your builds, we actually have a Discord channel called D2 Builds. This is actually a great place to come to. You can actually post your own build and have people rate it in the chat. I will say be wary, because if it's a crap build, Discord will let you know immediately. They'll be like, yo, that's garbage. At the same time, if it's a nasty build, everybody's gonna tell you so. And if it's super nasty, it's a good chance we're gonna come across it as well, and we'll probably end up making a video for it. Regardless though, Bombardiers with Parting Gift and these Scorch stacks that can also be applied with those extra ignitions and all these various mods that dips into this to give massive explosions. You've got a lot here that can work really well for you. So play around with it, guys. Again, if you want to lean into the ignitions, make those mod swaps. If you're going for survivability, stick with our base build. Either way it goes, for my hunters out there, this build should serve you well. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.